Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that some stories and discussions in this episode of Radiant Resilience may touch on sensitive and potentially triggering topics. These may include themes of discussions of grief and loss, infertility and fertility treatments, navigating difficult life transitions and letting go of dreams, mental health challenges, including depression. Our goal is to share real-life experiences in a respectful and empathetic manner, offering insights into the complexities of the human spirit and the journey towards resilience. However, we understand that some content might be difficult for listeners. We encourage you to prioritize your well-being and discretion when deciding to listen. Please remember this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice or support. If you find yourself needing assistance, we urge you to seek help from qualified professionals or trusted support systems. Your mental and emotional health is important to us. Thank you for your courage and for joining us in a space of understanding and compassion. Welcome back, everyone, to Radiant Resilience. I am so excited today because I think I'm fangirling out a little bit. Today, I have with me Tracey Cleantis Dwyer. She's a best-selling author and life coach with over 25 years of therapeutic experience. Tracey has a master's degree in counseling psychology from Pacifica Graduate Institute. Tracey authored the best-selling book, The Next Happy, Let Go of the Life You Planned and Find a New Way Forward, which received a Publishers Weekly starred review and was a finalist for the Books for a Better Life Award. Her second book, An Invitation to Self-Care, Why Learning to Nurture Yourself is the Key to the Life You Always Wanted, 7 Principles for Abundant Living, created a new and expansive definition of self-care. Tracey is a contributor to the Huffington Post and has written a column, Freudian Sips, for Psychology Today. She has been featured in, among others, Health, Eating Well, First for Women, Red Book, Aeon, Maclean's, Arroyo, Forest, and Bluff, Santa Barbara Press, Sojourner, Mode Magazine, Yahoo News, Salon.com, Psychologies Magazine, The Daily Mail, The Daily News, YourTango.com.
Okay, I know.
Tracey has appeared frequently on radio and television, including NPR Wisconsin, Fox News Boston, KTLA 5, and Portland AM Northwest. Woo, quite the accolades. How are you, Tracey? Thank you so much for coming.
I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited. So I read your book, The Next Happy. It was about a year ago, I think, maybe a little bit more. And it was brought to me or recommended to me by somebody. I don't even remember who recommended it. I feel like it was somebody I connected with on Instagram over infertility stuff. And the time came, the time was right. And I picked it up and I read it, and it was something I desperately needed to read at the time and needed to hear. And I love the concept of it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey prior to that and then leading into writing that book?
Yeah, thank you I can't tell you what it means to me that the book was helpful for you. And I'm going to maybe start backwards and then go through a little bit of my journey. I wrote The Next Happy because it was the book that I needed. I remember reading something that Elizabeth Gilbert wrote about we never write books for others, rewrite books for ourselves.
Mm.
And when I was at the end of my infertility journey, there was nothing.
Mm.
It was, now there's so much. Now there's so many books and so many resources. But at that time, there was no book.
Mm.
And I had read every book about how to conceive and how to manifest and how to get what you want and how to work through trauma and how to work through blocks to what's the issue that you're not conceiving. I had done everything, read everything, and there were so many resources. And to get to that stop point when I needed resources more than anything, there was nothing.
I will say, even still, at least for the community who made it through infertility to the other side without success, there is still very little out there for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Much more than what I ever,
Sure.
and I think it continues to grow. And
Yeah.
I want to clarify, The Next Happy is not a book just about coming to terms with infertility. And I actually, for lack of a better term, conceived the idea for The Next Happy when I was presenting, and I talk about this in the book, when I was presenting at a conference for people who were actively trying to conceive.
Mhm.
And I was on the panel with Lisa Manterfield, who also is an author who's written about life after baby, without baby. And I was sure that no one wanted to come and hear us talk about how to be happy without what you wanted most. They literally put us in the basement speaking, and it was this huge room. And I thought, it's going to be Lisa and I, and we'll have a chat and then we'll go home. Nobody will want to come here. But there were just hundreds of people who were still trying to conceive, who wanted to hear that there was a life after, with or without a baby. And it was in that I thought, okay, I've learned something from my journey, something that I needed to hear. And as a therapist, really saw parallels that this was not solely about being childless, not by choice, but
Mm.
that I had sat with people who'd had assorted dreams, career dreams, relationship dreams, who I'm going to be in this world dreams. And I think it's really likely that if by the time you're 25, you've had one dream that's not been fulfilled. So felt even a greater call to, this is something that needs to be said, because there's very much a message of never give up on your dreams.
Yeah, and I
And
think that was one of my favorite things about the book. And when I do tell people about the book, I'm like, oh yeah, she went through infertility, but it's not just about that. And I think it is important to realize that so many people feel those same feelings for different reasons out there too. And grieving some of the stories you shared, the grief and loss from those people as well, even though they were totally different journeys, was still similar feelings to, okay, now what do I look forward to? That's not, I saw it this way, I saw my life this way, and now it's not that way. And I have no idea where to go now.
absolutely. To your initial question, my infertility journey was, I was really committed and determined, and had gone over 20 IUIs, injections, without injections. I did 4 full rounds of IVF and then 3 implantations separate from that, and never conceived.
Mhm.
In that time, I went way out of my comfort zone and did absolutely everything that I could think of and more. I went to a Maori healer. I
Wow.
feng shuied my house.
Mhm.
I sought astrologers. I got on prayer lists. You name it, I did it. And at a certain point early on in my infertility journey, there was some wise voice that existed in my head that said, at some point, if this doesn't work, you're going to stop. And with each one of these rounds, even though I would say I became addicted to infertility treatment.
Yeah, I've talked about that with a couple other episodes of interviews, that it is easy to get addicted and it is so hard to walk away, because there's always that little tiny glimmer of hope that, okay, this is the next one. This one's going to be the one that works. If I just tweak this, if I just do this, if I change my mindset, it's going to work. And I think that was the hardest decision I've ever had to make. And it's been about a year since my last embryo transfer at the time we're recording this. And I still, every once in a while, I'm like, maybe I could do it one more time. And then I think about my heart and soul and what I've been through. And I'm like, no.
By the time of my last embryo transfer, I got to a clear and resounding
Mhm.
no, no
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
And there's so much when you get that call.
Mhm.
And if you say, okay, I'm back on board, I'm back on the train, then it's okay, this is the next date, and this is what you have to do, and this is how we're going to change things, and you need to come in and do this. But when I said, I'm done,
Mhm.
it was like, okay, bye. And it was so disorienting to have it be from, okay, train, being on that train, what do I do? What's the next thing? What's my follicle? What is it? How many times do I have to come in this week? To all of a sudden that not being a part of your life.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know who I was without that goal.
Mm-hmm. I also think that for me, at least, I didn't know who I was either moving. Okay. I just always thought I was going to be a mom. So now, okay. Yeah, there's that. Definitely. I feel what you're feeling on stopping the treatments and not having that to move towards in the future. But also, it was like, what does this mean for my life? Did you feel that too?
Absolutely. I think at first it was just this void of, okay, I'm a type A person. If I have set a goal, I'm going to achieve it. So just what is it to fail? And certainly conceptualize it for anyone else, but I conceptualized it that for myself of I failed. Who am I? What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And what's my life going to be ultimately without a child?
Yeah.
And at that point, I had taken a break. I've done long-term psychoanalysis and took a break during my infertility treatment because you can only see so many doctors in a week, and went back. And I remember sitting in my analyst's office and him asking me this question it was such a big question. And it may not seem like it on the face of it, but he said to me, "Why do you want this so much?" And Tawny, I remember at that moment thinking that is the stupidest question anyone has ever asked me.
Yeah.
Like, why do you want to take a breath? Why is water important? It
Yeah.
just felt so self-evident.
Mm-hmm.
But I was so angry about
Mm-hmm.
this. And for days. And I remember coming back in and just, I think probably the entire session was me just, how dare you? Don't you get it? This is so important. And then just gently, he asked again, but why?
Mm-hmm.
And I chose to. I chose to engage with that question
Mm-hmm.
and to ask myself, why did I want this so much?
Mm-hmm.
What did I really want from this?
Did you ever come up with an answer?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's layered answers, right? Because there's obvious reasons why we want to be generative, why we want to have a family, why that's all top layer stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
he was asking me about another level, like, why are you so desperate that you're doing something that over and over again your body is saying this isn't working for you? What is the level of desperation hinting at that you really want? And the answer I got was had this fantasy of I was going to create this life that was going to give a child the kind of childhood I wanted.
Mm.
It was going to be a do-over.
Oh.
Even to where my ex-husband and I, we moved to Chicago. We lived in a very kind of idyllic neighborhood, and there was a real emphasis on education and community. And there was all of that stuff whirling around my mind. This is what I wanted. I wanted my parents to give me that kind of environment and that kind of experience and that sense of safety. And I wanted to live in Mayberry. And I wanted to do that for this imaginary child.
Mm.
And what I came to as I really thought about that is Jung says the worst thing you can do, the biggest impact on a child is the unlived life of the parent.
Mm. Yeah.
Should I have succeeded and not been clear about that, my agenda about my unlived life was going to harm someone else.
Mm.
Now, do I think that I'm a person who's reflective enough and will continue to do therapy for the rest of my life? So I probably would have become aware of it. Yes. But that wouldn't have fixed things for me.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have healed what was lingering in terms of childhood wounds and my own trauma. Just the physical act of having a child wouldn't have healed that.
Mm.
And I can tell you that I see in parents that I've worked with in therapeutic work, their stuff comes up around, okay, 3 is when my stuff happened. Oh my gosh, my daughter's 3. This is so hard for me. I'm really being activated by this.
Mm.
It's not a fix.
Yeah.
It becomes just a greater mirror. And so it was actually in doing a lot of media for the next happy that talking about it even more made me really aware of, even though I was a therapist and a successful one, and on the surface looked like I was doing everything right,
Mm.
my self-care sucked so bad.
Really?
Child Protective Services would have taken me away from me. Like, I have to go to the bathroom. I don't need a sweater. I'm cold, but I don't need a sweater. Oh, you need something? Oh, I'll do that for you. Okay, I'm not going to go to sleep when I need to go to sleep because you need something for me. Or, oh, I'm going to work that extra time and not go to the doctor. There
Mm.
was just a myriad of ways that I was not taking care of myself. In really reflecting on what I was trying to do is I was trying to give someone else what I needed. And we all know that story about if you're in a plane with a child and the oxygen mask comes down, that's what really I was being called to do.
Mm. So you came up with your answer to that question while you were marketing the next happy and doing all that. That's interesting. So it did help you through a lot.
Absolutely. And I'd already gotten to in writing the next happy that it was about trying to fill those wounds or trying to give myself that. But the specificity of, wow, you really need to take that energy that you wanted to give some imaginary child and treat your inner child and care for that child that exists within you that's been neglected, not just in your own family, but by yourself.
Mm. Hi, friend, and welcome to this episode of Radiant Resilience. We are always looking for new guests on the podcast. I want to highlight you if you have a story of resilience that inspires others. Everyone has a story, and I believe that sharing yours can help others feel less alone. Are you ready to share your journey and inspire others? I want to hear from you. Every story has the power to impact lives and foster a supportive community. If you have a tale of overcoming adversity, personal growth, or a unique perspective on life's challenges, I would love to have you as a guest on the podcast. To become a guest, please email us directly at radiantresiliencepodcast@gmail.com or click the link in the show notes to become a guest. Join us in spreading hope, strength, and inspiration one story at a time. Be brave and share your story so others feel less alone. I hope to see you soon. Yeah, that's huge. That's a big realization to come to. How long after you were asked that question did you come up with that answer?
I think it was a couple of weeks of
Okay.
work. I think the level of anger and frustration and outrage gave me a clue
Yeah.
about what it was pointing to.
Yeah.
Even the fantasy material of how I thought what being a parent would be and what kind of child I would have
Mm-hmm.
gave me a lot of clues.
Yeah. Oh, so how long after you decided to stop your fertility treatment did you write the next happy?
3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Was it like was it in your brain at the time or like prior to that? Or when did you I don't know, what made you decide to finally be like, okay, I'm going to write this down to help people?
The first year after ending infertility treatment was very dark for me.
Mm.
There were months where I couldn't get myself out of bed, deep depression.
Mm-hmm.
And my ex-husband got me a dog. And if I couldn't get out of the bed for myself, I got out of bed for Lily and took her for walks. And so there was no thought of anything creative for that first year.
Yeah.
And people might look at how long it took me and say, oh, that's excessive, or that's disproportionate grief, or that's
Mm.
but I know you wouldn't.
I'm like, man, grief is comes in all shapes and sizes, and
Yeah,
everybody's journey is so different. And for it just sometimes it just amazes me the amount of judgment we have in this world. It's crazy.
for sure. But I really felt like that honoring the grief was
Mm.
part of it.
Yeah.
And I know how hard that is. I know
Mm.
how I've seen it with patients. I've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it with people that you've talked to that there's just an impulse of, okay, gonna get a new goal, gonna get back on that horse, gonna do something, right? And if you don't deal with it, it's gonna come back up. And the more you repress, the bigger it gets.
Yeah.
And so I felt a real commitment to honoring the enormity of the grief.
Mm.
And there was no space really for anything creative at that point.
Yeah.
So it really was, I started to do some writing about my infertility experience. I had a blog back in the day when everyone had blogs,
Yeah.
and it was called La Belle Rouge, and it had absolutely nothing to do with infertility. It had to do with being a psychotherapist, and there's not a lot of room for talking about silliness like fashion or interest in being a Francophile. So it was this kind of creative outlet for me. And I remember one day I got test results that, again, I was not pregnant.
Mm.
And I just decided, what the heck? I'm on the floor crying. I'm going to write about this in
Mm.
this forum where really people were just interested in talking about red shoes or Paris.
Yeah.
And when I did, people were there and interested and supportive, and I developed a real community of other women who also were going through infertility treatment, women who weren't. And through that, I began to get offered to speak about it as a therapist, as someone who was going through this journey. And so it was through that, in being asked to talk about how to talk to your family about infertility on Fox News or different things that were happening, that I started to think, okay, I have something to say about this, and there needs to be conversations about this that are different and held differently. And that was even as I was still pursuing infertility treatment.
Oh, wow.
But in the grief, there was no idea that I was going to write something until really being at that conference and seeing the tears in couples' faces of, please tell me that we're going to be happy. Tell me there's a way. Tell me there's a life that's going to be satisfying and meaningful with or without a child. That I just knew I had to write the book.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's definitely, I think that's one of the things I've struggled with the most is just not knowing what the future is bringing. And that sounds so silly because none of us know what the future is going to bring, right? Even if you have children, who knows what's going to happen. But there was something about when I walked away from all that, okay, I don't know. And it's terrifying. And I'm still trying to come to terms with it. But I think that's the scariest thing because, and some of that is society based too. We're just told that's what you're supposed to do is just have children and have a family. And then your whole life becomes your children and what they're doing and all of those things. And then later you figure out yourself.
Yeah,
And so to be facing that earlier on when you weren't expecting it, it's a scary thing. So I feel for all those couples as well.
absolutely. Yeah, I think that as the kind of therapy that I did, and the methodology I was trained in is Jungian psychology. And Jung was a student of Freud and also a big believer in unpacking dreams. He had a different approach than Freud. Not everything was about sex, but that there were that there were attempts by your psyche and your unconscious to make you aware of things, that there were these messages that you're being brought every night, trying to get you to say, hey, look at this, take a look at this. Now, most often people just say crazy dream, don't take the dream seriously, but waking dreams are taken very seriously.
Yeah, that's true.
I think I have brought a Jungian lens to what it is we desire, the way that I would a dream. So when I'm working with a sleeping dream with someone, I don't take it literally. If there's a death in the dream, we don't say, okay, this means there's going to be a death. No,
Yeah.
it's more, okay, what is this a metaphor? What's dying in you? What's coming to an end in your life that something wants to be reborn in you? And looking at it symbolically, we really don't do that with dreams that are waking dreams. They're
Yeah.
just simply literal. I have a dream of being an actor. I have a dream of having the ideal partner. I have a dream of having a home on the coast. It's just taken as literal, and that there's not symbolic content. And I think we're really missing something in not diving deeper to say, what's the unconscious? What's the desire in wanting this thing, this experience, this becoming? And I truly believe that whatever the dream is, that it's possible, just not literal.
I love that.
And that doesn't mean for people going through infertility, you get to be a mother for everyone. Ugh. Ugh. Right? Or just that, like what people suggest, oh, you can always do this, or you could always do that, or you could know that there's something being called in you, in me, and it's different for all of us. It's just as a Jungian, I have no place in my heart for dream dictionaries because it's not specific to you, right? What you associate um, the dream with is so unique and specific.
Yeah.
And so to unpack that and to discover, okay, what's my associations? What did I imagine I would be? Who did I imagine I would be in having this thing? What's the qualities and characteristics I would have if I stepped into that Demeter, that mother archetype that are missing in me? So that's very much a part of the longing that I had for the next happy is for people to really think about their dreams and their desires in a different way. And I believe that if you do that, as well as I said earlier, really making time for the grief,
Yeah.
making time for the grief and really just unpacking what did I really want and understanding it symbolically and not getting so attached to whatever the dream was in such a literal way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you mentioned in the next happy several people that were trying to start businesses. That really resonated with me too. I think you were talking about there was a couple that wanted to, oh, what was it? They
Hotel.
wanted, yes, the hotel and casino. Is that what it was?
Right.
I can't remember where, of course.
Vegas.
It was Vegas.
Las
Okay.
Vegas.
I was thinking it was like Atlantic City or something. Anyways, yeah, and they like dumped all of their life savings into it, and they were, for whatever reason, it still wasn't happening, and they were like living on friends' couches. And am I getting the story right still?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they finally had to say enough is enough. And I just think that's an interesting perspective too, because like you're talking about dreams, our dreams and goals as humans in this real world too, not just the dream of being a mother and things like that, but that was defining those people so much for so long. I think you said, was it 10 years they were doing that?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, every year when I watch the Academy Awards, somebody wins Best Actor and looks to the camera and they're crying and they say, "Never give up on your dreams." I'm like, oh my
Mm,
gosh, do you know that only 2% of actors in the Screen Actors Guild are working actors?
mm,
Having the dream is not enough.
yeah.
And what's the dream about? I've worked with a lot of would-be actors, and it's been about I'm going to be loved by everyone.
Mm,
And I'm going to be recognized by everyone. I'm going to feel constantly loved and accepted. And I'll say to them, go and Google, what do people think about Anne Hathaway?
oh, you'll find all the bad too. Oh gosh.
But there's that fantasy of if I get that, if I get that Academy Award, I'm going to be accepted and loved and approved of, and I'm going to feel this good constantly Jim Carrey is such an amazing exemplar of showing us the other side of that. He dreamed of that big check. He went up there every night on the mountain and imagined that check and did the secret stuff and got his dream, but it didn't give him what he wanted.
Yeah. I love that example. I think that's a great example because and a great example of like of the digging for more, right? Like what that means and people wanting that love and acceptance in that. That's a hard thing to come to terms with because we are told so much. You got to manifest it. You have to think about it differently. You have to be positive. Like I remember sitting in my little sunroom with my eyes closed, visualizing a baby in my belly growing, like all the things, the sperm meeting the egg. I have never done so much visualization work in my life. And what advice do you have for somebody who hasn't recognized the time to stop or move on?
To call myself in the book the Dr. Kevorkian of dreams. And if you're too young to remember, Dr. Kevorkian was a doctor who helped people come to end of life if they had terminal illnesses where there was no hope. Yeah, it's not necessarily a catchy self-help title to call yourself the Dr. Kevorkian of dreams, but I offered an inventory in the Next Happy to look at what is this costing you? Because I don't believe I am not telling everybody you need to stop pursuing a dream. But you have to look at what it's costing you. And I'm sure that you made that assessment for yourself, right? It can be financial costs, it can be relational costs, it can be cost to your body, costs to your psyche, that there's just an enormous spiritual costs. There's enormous. So to really do an inventory to say, what is the cost how much have I invested in this? And am I continuing to only invest because I believe, number one, this is the only way I can be happy? Whatever there's only one way, we know that we're in a place of mild delusion, right? Because there's always a multitude of ways to get to happiness, fulfillment. But when we're so attached, we're in a space where we're not really seeing the reality of it. So I think that's an important piece. And just really doing that assessment of, is it now because I've put so much into it? Sunk costs, right? I've already done this much. I've already come this far. I've already taken out all of this debt to pursue this business. I've already spent so much on this. I've already put so much time into it. I can't pull out now. That's not a reason to continue in
For sure.
So I think that paired with really opening the door to, okay, what is it I really want from this? And is it true that's the only way that I can get it? And if you're saying it is the only way, maybe it's time to talk to a friend or a coach or a therapist or a minister that you have a relationship with to help you see bigger perspective, because you can get so possessed by the pursuit of that you can't see that there's anything else.
Yeah. Ugh. Do you have any other examples we've talked about the actor, we've talked about the couple with the Vegas hotel, maybe just for those listening who aren't going through infertility or whatever, something else that resonates with others?
I think relationship is a big one,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we don't conceptualize that as a dream. And I think that's a problem. It's okay, this relationship isn't working. I'm doing everything on my side of the street. This is how relationships should be. And so I'm just going to keep working and doing everything on my end and ignoring that I'm the only one trying to do anything in this relationship to make it better. Or my church or my family says that I have to stay in this relationship, or relationships have to look this way, right? It's not dissimilar than the infertility story.
Yeah.
So that there's so much shame for so many people of if a relationship comes to an end. And it can be the same kind of, I had this dream about it. I have all of this sunk cost. We've been together so long. I couldn't possibly be in another relationship. I couldn't possibly be happy in another relationship, but I'm not happy now.
Yeah, that's a great one.
I'm sure you've seen examples in people you've interviewed that.
Yeah, for sure. I've had a ton of interviews too of people in that specific instance of being unhappy in relationships or being in abusive relationships. And I think one of my interviews, the girl stayed for 10 years before she walked away because that's what she was supposed to. So,
Yeah.
and I think the thought in a lot of these examples too, the thought of starting over too, like you feel like if that relationship ends, if that dream of that hotel doesn't happen, if you never become a mom, if you don't become that actor, then
it's the if then, right?
yeah,
Like it's this like algebraic equation in our mind that we say, if I do this or if I don't get this, then I'm going to be fill in the blanks.
yeah,
How often are we wrong about how
yeah,
things are going to be? But in those moments, we're so sure that we know what the future is going to be.
yeah. That's where I was going with that too.
Yeah.
The starting over, like the thought of now I'm going to break off this relationship, or now I need to find a different career, or now, like, when that was not in your vision of your life at all, it's scary. And then if you're somebody too who you break off a relationship and you have to start that over in your 30s or something like that, and you still haven't tried to have children or whatever, and then you're putting that off, and I don't know, I think that is a scary thing, and change is really hard for a lot of people too.
Sure. Sure. And I think that when you've been through a never give up process, that when you finally give up, when you say, okay, time of death on the dream, I'm going to allow myself to grieve, I'm going to allow myself to really explore. One of the gifts of it is that it's easier
Mhm.
to not hold on so tight, to not cling so tightly onto something, right? That it has to be this way, or it just you just don't do it in the same way. You've been through that ordeal. You've learned that lesson. You've learned that there's, okay, I thought this was the only way I could be happy. I thought I could never find love again. I thought I could never have another career.
Mhm.
Oh, I was wrong. So here I am up against something now. And yeah, it's scary. And no, I don't want to start over. And oh gosh, I thought this was the job, or I thought this was the guy, or I thought this was the girl. Okay, but now I've learned that I learned a lot from letting go of that last one. I now have the ability to say, I'm not going to stay in something and I'm going to make a better choice. And I'm going to get something from this choice and get to a new, happier place.
Yeah. It's so scary. I know, because I'm still in the middle of that. I'm getting up closer to the other side, but and so I feel for everyone out there that's
Me
in that
too.
spot. It's so scary and hard. But that's what I loved about this. You mentioned the death date of your dream,
Yes.
which sounds morbid, but it's actually not when you explain it in the book. And I think it definitely is true, because at least for me and my infertility journey, always having that next treatment, like you were talking about, always having that next thing. And I remember my husband would be like, can we just take a break? Not saying stop. Can we just take a break? And I'd be like, yeah. And then a week later, I'm like, all right, so what's next? And always wanting that next thing. And finally saying, this is it. I'm not pursuing that next thing. I don't know that I ever picked like a specific date, but I definitely in my mind was like, this is it. I think that's an interesting concept as well, is to pick that date so that you can move forward away from it.
Yeah. And when I talk about that in the book, I talk about calling time of death, and I talked about that the death is more complicated than we think. So that when we call time of death, that can mean, okay, I'm no longer going to do something behaviorally about it. So for me, that meant I'm not seeing another infertility doctor. I'm not calling another Maori healer. I'm like done with that. But at that time, there was very much every time I would see a baby, it was crying, or, oh, I don't want to sit at that table in the restaurant because there's a pregnant woman. There was all of this emotional stuff, and there was certainly mental.
Yeah.
And in time, it moved from just being behavioral to being, it's not so mental. I'm not thinking about it so much. My energy is going to another place. I'm thinking about other things. I'm not possessed the way I was with that. And then finally, the emotional. Now, I would say the emotional doesn't ever, did I ever think that I would be the place I'm at? And just this morning, I went and had coffee. Adorable little girl with a unicorn hat on was wanting to take a little piece of my muffin off my plate. There was a time that would have destroyed me.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can flirt with that little girl and smile and play peekaboo and enjoy it without heartbreak.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe there's once or twice a year where something happens. I see a movie or there's some memory and it comes back in a big way,
Yeah.
but it's not what it was.
Yeah.
I didn't think that was possible. I didn't think I could be happy without a child. I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So what else am I wrong about?
Mm.
What else am I telling myself? What else am I telling about myself about limits or how I can be happy or what are how trustworthy of a narrator am I?
Mm. And so we need to give ourselves a little bit of credit for that, though, because a lot of that is societal conditioning as well. And we have to
Sure.
unlearn a lot of that stuff.
Absolutely, but I'm telling you, and I know I'm sure better people who have it, these things become so solidified in our head of it's too old, I'm too old to do this, or I'm too late, or I can't have this, or all of these things, and we just believe it, and it stops us from having a bigger, fuller life.
So true. You're missing out on the life you're living currently, living in the future. Mm, that's good. So, what are you doing now? I know we've talked so much about the next happy, but I know that was a past project and now you're working on some new stuff. Yeah, tell me what you're up to now and what your goals are and how you're helping people still and all those things.
Sure. So I in Halloween of last year, almost a year ago, I retired from therapy
Mm,
and had worked as a therapist for nearly 25 years.
mhm,
Loved it and found the work to be incredibly meaningful. And at a certain point, I realized that much of what I was doing that work was looking back with people. I think especially the kind of trauma work and
mm,
attachment and Jungian work I was doing, which was very much looking at what's the past of your life and how is that impacting now. And that's important work. And I'm so grateful and privileged. Can't even tell you, it's extraordinary work. It's just been an amazing career for me.
that's a big one to retire from.
Yeah. And I made the decision my husband and I moved to Park City during COVID from Los Angeles. And I was working in my basement, seeing clients, patients on Zoom. And just there was this realization of I wanted to be moving out and helping people not just focus on the past, which again is so meaningful and important, but I wanted to shift that orientation to helping people, okay, where am I now? And where do I want to be moving towards? So that's been a big shift for me in terms of helping people use Jungian work, use depth psychology to explore not just the goals that we all set for ourselves on New Year's, right?
Yeah.
But to discover those deeper callings that we might not be aware of, what we might be dreaming of that we're not aware that we're dreaming of,
Mm.
and how we might be stopping ourselves from taking action or taking risks or doing something that we wouldn't dare to dream with our conscious mind. So it's been this really interesting shift from looking at the back, but looking at the depthful calling for what your psyche and your spirit are longing for.
So still stemming from why did you want that dream? And
Yes.
let's, okay, that dream didn't work out, unfortunately, but what now? So I love that
Yeah,
because it does all tie together. So
absolutely. And working on a couple of books, so that's exciting.
yay. I have
And
not read your other book.
an invitation to self-care.
Yeah, I feel like I need to read that one for sure. I'm
It
gonna
came out before the big self-care boom. It was like just before it hit. So I just always feel like very protective. I want to say it's not trite. It's not just go get a manicure.
Oh yeah.
This is really about self-care is very much about like, why don't you? what we've learned from society and family and maybe our placement in family that stops us from doing that. What, as women, maybe why we don't do it, and maybe why we're only allowed certain avenues for it,
Yeah.
and to broaden it to what's self-care in relationship, what's self-care in your finances, what's self-care in terms of establishing, making sure you have good physicians that you can be really honest with, and that they're going to show up and return your call, and like really how to deep dive into curating a life that's responsive to your needs, and you being responsive to your needs. And I can't help it. I'm always analyzing things from why are we doing this to look at, okay, so why am I spending so much time scrolling on Facebook? Let me look at that as opposed to, tisk tisking, like what's wrong with me? Maybe you want more connection.
Mm.
Maybe there's something at the people you're particularly looking at that's an indicator of this friend of mine is always traveling and I keep looking at this page. But you're not letting yourself think that. You're just thinking, gosh, I'm done. I'm doom scrolling. This is ridiculous. And you, as opposed to seeing it as a call to something, there's a kind of shaming of those behaviors. Or if you're on your lunch hour, you're instead of going to lunch, you're getting a Starbucks and you're going to Sephora. Okay. Again, we're going to say, oh, that's not good, right? It's okay. What's the good in it? I want more stimulation. I'm feeling understimulated in the afternoon. What's real stimulation that's going to satisfy? I'm craving more beauty. What is it? What am I looking at? Am I looking at colors? Am I looking at scents? Or is this stemming from some kind of insecurity and I'm telling myself I'm not enough? The lipstick's not going to fix that.
Mm.
So all of these, what I call black magic, white magic, and gray magic types of self-care. And the white magic being the things we all agree on. Floss your teeth, go to the doctor once a year, drink
Mhm.
water. Those are, we all know. And the sort of black magic being addiction, uh,
Mm.
alcohol, drugs, gambling, sex addiction, destructive relationships. Those two are an attempt at self-care.
Mm. Oh,
Yeah, that's tough, huh?
that just blew my mind for a minute. You're so right. We need to look at these things differently. There's a reason behind all of that. Nobody's just an alcoholic for no reason.
No. So, what is it you're saying at the end of the day if you consistently need 3 glasses of wine, right? What's going on? Are there relationships at work? Are you talking to your mother on the way home and it's always a fight? Is there something going on with friendships? Is there something that you need to create that you're not putting energy into and you're trying to blunt that? I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
but I know that there's something. And I know that those things that we all say, ooh, like bad addictions. It's no, that there's a purpose in there to try to soothe, to try to comfort, to try to ameliorate some anxiety or stress, or give yourself something that you feel like you can't get in another way.
Yeah.
So look at like how can we take these things that we say are, maybe the darker magic, and how can we bring them into consciousness? How can we bring them into the light to say, okay, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be spending hours on social media, but as opposed to just shaming yourself and blaming yourself, to ask yourself, you know what? I really don't have the community I want.
Mm.
I really want to feel validated. I want oh gosh, I need a bunch of likes today.
Mm.
Like, why are you not feeling validated? Where could you feel validated? Where are you not feeling validated in relationships? Are you not self-validating?
Mm. Oh, I love that because we do scold ourselves way too often. So reframing
Absolutely.
it and
Reframing it, right? Whatever it is, if it's staying up late, if it's overspending, whatever it is, there's some grain, just as in a dream. There's some grain of, I'm trying to get a need met here. And so we tisk and shame ourselves instead of trying to understand, what do I want?
do the people you work with come to those conclusions quickly, or does it take a while, or do you try to help them along to realize it themselves, or how does that usually work with you?
I, it's, I think if you're coming to me, there's probably a willingness.
That's true.
And you probably know that there's going to be some depthful exploration, and I am not going to be the one to tell you,
Mm,
right? I don't have the answers, but I'm pretty good at asking questions to help you get to your answers. They can easily give you the answers.
yeah.
Um, with dream work, or with even just talking about what movie you're watching obsessively, or what's the fantasy that you have, or what's the if I could only, and if you can tell me that story of if you could only, there's so much there. We're constantly flooded with material from our unconscious trying to say, hey, this is what you want, this is what you're seeking. And we just don't have eyes to see or ears to hear.
And sometimes it takes that outside point of view or perspective from someone else for you to be like, oh, yeah, that's why that makes so much more sense.
Yeah, I remember being in grad school and just all of a sudden blown away by the idea that we never are able to see ourselves fully. We're
Mm,
the only person who can't see ourselves fully, right? Just, I see you in a way that you can't. You can only see yourself through a mirror, a picture, a camera. We're never going to be able to see ourselves in completion and fulfillment. So to have somebody else to say, hey, I see what maybe you can't see, and have you thought about it like this? It makes a big difference.
yeah, for sure. So do you work with people one-on-one? Is it like that, or do you have a course or all of the above?
No, just one-on-one.
Yeah, just one-on-one with people who reach out to you. And do you do
Absolutely.
like hour sessions like that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And are you able to talk about the upcoming books?
I am.
Okay.
Um, you're not going to be surprised by this, but the nonfiction book I'm working on is about desire and about why we want the things we want,
Like,
physical things.
mm,
I got very interested in, I don't know if you ever see any of those street fashion YouTube videos of people walking on the street in Paris, and someone walks up to them and says, so could tell me what's in your bag?
mm,
Or tell me what's on your wish list for what do you want for the fall season? And I got so curious about how people, when they would talk about this, would look up. And the Latin root of the word desire is desire, which means to look to the stars.
oh,
So when we're craving even something as innocuous as a pair of red boots,
mhm,
there's a whole vision of who's the person with red boots. Who
mm,
would you be if you had the thing? Who's the person who has the KitchenAid mixer? And who's the person who, like, what's the fantasy? And so I'm trying to work on journaling through with people a process of where did this idea come from? Did it just come to you like a flash or a dream? Or did you see someone who had it? And work through what's the process of going from wanting it to having it, and does the thing give it to you? You'll
I
notice
love
a theme
that.
for me.
And this is something that all brand name companies are doing behind the scenes to get us to.
Absolutely.
That's how they create their target markets is this is the girl with the red boots and that's what you want and
Yeah.
everyone else. Oh,
Yeah.
I love that.
And sometimes it can be, I'm not writing an anti-materialist, I like things, an anti-materialist book, but sometimes the thing can help you as almost like a talisman, like Dorothy's red shoes, right? Like she didn't really need the shoes,
Yep.
but they gave her a sense of there's magic in how I'm walking forward in the
Mhm.
world. But she gets there and Dorothy says, you like really didn't need them. They
Yeah.
were just, you had it all along.
Yeah.
And things can work like that
Mhm.
to help us become aware or hold on to, literally
Yeah.
hold on to those qualities or associations. For example, I have here a heart that's symbolic of my horse died recently.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And he was such an amazing being of quick transitions and how things can happen so quickly, and it doesn't have to be hard work. And so sometimes I will just, when I'm sitting with someone, I'll just hold that, not in that this crystal actually holds his being or his essence, but it reminds me of the truth of things don't always have to be hard, that it can be joyous and quick transitions, and as a reminder. And so I believe that the red boots or the KitchenAid mixer or whatever it is you want can be meaningful and made more meaningful by understanding what you want from it.
Yeah. I
Right.
used
So,
to, oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead. If I just bought this crystal and I didn't have any association with it, what it doesn't do anything.
Yeah. Just sits on a desk.
It's going to sit there on the desk. Oh, pretty white heart.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. What were you going to say?
Oh, I used the analogy with my husband recently because he's not a huge dig into your past and traumas and stuff. He's led a pretty easy life, relatively. I used the analogy with him one time of a car, right? If a car breaks down and you don't know why it broke down, it is nearly impossible to fix it. You have to know what happened, why it broke in order to fix it. And I think looking at all of these things that you're talking about in such a different way of the why and how and what it means in each individual's life is so important. And I think it just brings clarity to each of us as an individual and understanding. And I feel so much more comfort when I understand why I'm doing certain things. And I feel like I can fix it once I know those whys.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And the other book that I'm working on is my first book of nonfiction or fiction.
Oh, yay.
And I'm a little more tight-lipped about that.
Okay, that's fine.
But I will say that this process of my own next happy journey and an invitation to self-care, and I'll give credit to both, but I would say it's maybe more a next happy experience, that the way that I'm approaching this is so different. When I first started writing, I wrote before I became a therapist. I was worked in a newspaper and sold short stories and had a little writing career. But in that early phase of my writing, it was, when I do this, I will feel this. When I do this, daddy will love me. When I do this, I'm going to be this kind of person. There was so much outcome dependence
Okay.
on that creative endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
What I love about this creative endeavor for me is, this is for me.
Mm-hmm.
This, there's no, that I'm consciously aware of, there's no, if I get this, then everything's going to change.
Yeah.
It's, if I write this in a way that's true for me, that's important for me.
Yeah.
So that's a really, I think, real benefit of having gone through that next happy experience, is to be really honest and true with yourself about the motive and the goal and any outcome dependence you have on, this will give me something other than this.
What advice do you have for somebody who has that thought in their head about whatever they're going through, whatever they're doing, of having that specific outcome and being dependent on that? What advice would you give somebody who's in that place right now?
I would say that there's work on acceptance of whatever you want from it, whatever it is. And I challenge you to come up with something where maybe it's not true. I want to be wrong. I would say that you already have it.
Mm.
You're like Dorothy. It's not at the end of the road. It's not going to take the red shoes. You don't need to get back to Kansas. Whatever it is, whether it's love or acceptance or self-worth or seeing yourself differently, or it's already available right now.
Yeah. Just got to dig for it. Be open to it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this conversation. Thank you so much for being here. Final words do you have for everybody out there listening?
I acknowledge and you for seeking resilience
Mm.
and um, for you creating this space for people to tell their stories. And if you're listening to this, it means that you already believe that there's a next happy for you, that if you're listening to this, you're seeking that, and whatever you're seeking, you can have.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you for having this conversation with me. I'm so excited for your next book. I'm going to go back and read the other book, the self-care book, because I think I'm in a space of needing that right now as well. Where are the best places for people to find you?
LegendaryLifeCoach.net.
All right. I will link that in the show notes for sure as well. And then I will link to your books and all the things. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you learned some things, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation and found value in the stories shared, please consider following us on your preferred podcast platform. Your ratings and reviews make a huge difference. They help us reach more listeners and continue bringing you engaging, insightful content. We appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Until next time, keep listening, growing, and sharing.